Hello, I'm Dee Brown, CEO, and welcome to this episode of Self-Made. Joining me on this episode is Washington power broker, Jarvis Stewart. Jarvis is the chairman and president of Highland Poe. Jarvis, welcome to Self-Made.
Thanks, Dee. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm glad to have you on the show.
Absolutely.
Jarvis, listen, your background is just so interesting. And so I want to jump in and really set the stage for my viewers so they can understand your journey to where you are now.
Sure.
So talk to me about your childhood, growing up in the inner cities of Houston, Texas, what that was like, the challenges you faced, so that we can kind of set the stage.
Well, again, thank you for having me. And you're right.
welcome.
I grew up in Houston, Texas. Single mother, raised 5 kids. My mom later got remarried later in life. But it was an amazing experience. Our home was filled with love and laughter. My older brothers and sisters were artists, poets, musicians, dancers, and I was the youngest. I am still the youngest of 5, and so I sort of embraced a lot of that excitement of growing up. My mother, who's a fantastic writer herself and public speaker. It was just amazing to sort of watch and experience as I look back on my life now. Wonderful, great community. I grew up in a neighborhood called Acres Home, which is in the north part of Houston, and pretty tough community.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't know it at the time.
Same here, man.
We had no idea, but it was a tough community, and my mom will tell you that she, as much as it inspired us to do great things, she knew that our lives were much bigger than that neighborhood and much bigger than Houston.
Right.
Tons of cousins and aunts and uncles who were part of our village and part of our upbringing, and so I'm delighted. Many of them are still around. They're still. They call me Chris.
Yeah.
Big Chris. Little Chris. I have all kinds of Chris's.
All kinds of Chris's.
Which Christopher is my middle name.
Okay.
So a number of my family still refer to me as Chris versus Jarvis.
But growing up in Houston, like you said, a tough community. What were some of the challenges that you faced and obstacles you had to overcome? Yeah,
I mean, you know, I don't shy away from the idea of growing up on federal assistance. We were on welfare and AFDC and all the other programs. Mom was doing her very best to have a part-time job and still try to raise kids. The schools were not, the public schools were not the best. Where I went to high school, when I went to elementary school. In the 3rd grade, however, my mom found out that there was a great program where I could be transferred from the local community, the local community school, to across town to a more affluent public school called Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
That experience really broadened my vision about life. You know, when I look back, I had to get up every morning at about 5:30 in order to catch the school bus at 6:30.
Yeah.
And travel some 20 miles across Houston in order to go to my elementary school.
Yeah.
The school was mostly white kids. There were a few black kids from that also had the opportunity to attend the school. But it was a unique environment. I often tell people that, you know, I'd never seen those many white people gathered in person until I went to elementary school.
Yeah.
Usually if someone in my neighborhood showed up that was white to our door, it was the police officer.
Right.
But I'd never seen a white teacher. I never had opportunity to see so many other white kids. And it was great. And I fell right into it, and kids invited me to their homes and their families and got to know their friends. There was one example that a very, very dear friend of mine, she and I are still friends today. Her name is Jawan Gregory. I'll never forget, Jawan's African American. She's a teacher now in Houston. Her father went on to become, was one of the most accomplished architects in Houston in the 1970s. And I'll never forget, Jawan's father used to show up and pick her up from school. He had a convertible Spider, which is a little sports car.
Right.
And I just thought that changed my life, Dee, because I'd never, mom and dad worked a lot.
Yeah.
And just didn't have the opportunity to come. So to see a black man to come pick up his daughter from elementary school
Right.
daily.
Yeah.
In a convertible car. It's like, I don't know what he does or who he is, but I was like, Juwan, I want to be just like your dad when I grow up. And in later years, Juwan and I got to be very close. We're still very close now. And he passed away some years ago. And I told her, I said, Juwan, you have no idea how impactful your dad was on my life, because I said I want to have a career where I didn't miss any volleyball games, lacrosse games,
Right.
track and field games of my daughters.
Right.
And that was just very impactful, and it started with your dad. And so as a result, she and I have been kindred spirits ever since.
So talk to me about high school. Where did you go to high school, and what were those years like?
Yeah, so I attended a magnet school in Houston. We have various magnet schools where students that have a certain interest or certain academic achievement level. I attended high school for law enforcement and criminal justice, which was an HISD, Houston Independent School District magnet school. And it was specifically for kids that were interested in pursuing careers in criminal justice and law enforcement, wanted to be a lawyer, someone of that space.
Yeah.
And by that time, I had already decided that I wanted to do something in politics or in law. I wanted to go to law school after college. But I was sort of opened up to this world of politics and business and international relations, that law school became a thing of the past. But my high school years were fantastic. I did play sports when I was in middle school and a little bit while I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was fairly good at it, but not good enough to play in college, and didn't want to sort of elevate it to that level. I was in ROTC, which I was recognized as maybe the second or third best cadet ROTC, junior ROTC cadet in the state of Texas. Okay. And so I thought about a career in the military at one point,
Yeah.
But that too sort of fell by the wayside. My high school career was great. Tons of friends to this very day that we still stay in contact with. And I learned a lot about myself and really the direction that I wanted to go.
So after high school, you attended Prairie View A&M University.
I did.
What did you major in? And just kind of walk me through graduating from Prairie View, and what was your first job that you landed?
So I attended Prairie View A&M University, which is about an hour or so outside of Houston. I was a political science and geography major. At one point, I thought I wanted to, again, go to law school, and I thought that would lay a great foundation to do so. But in my junior year, I had the opportunity to get an internship working for Ron Brown,
Yep.
who at the time was became the first chair of the Democratic National Committee. And I went to Washington and spent a great deal of time working for him. And I was fortunate enough to have a great chair of my department at Prairie View who says, hey, come back and finish your degree, write me a paper of what you've been doing for the last year while you're in Washington, and then we'll make all the other classes, pass on all the other classes. And so it was great.
Yeah.
So I did what I was asked to do, finished, got my degree. I never walked across the stage. This is a fun fact that my mother, she sees this, she's gonna be very, very, very upset that I'm telling this story. But in the midst of the graduation, I was anxious to get back to Washington and work on campaigns. And so I knew as long as I achieved all of my credit hours and got the letter from the registrar that I was a graduate of the university, I didn't care about walking across the stage and people shouting my name. Well, I'm my mom's last child. She had 5 kids, and so I'm the last one, and she never saw me walk across the stage. And in many ways, she's never let me live it down. So yeah, and so my first job, when I was in college, I worked for the local county attorney there at Prairie View in Waller County, Texas. Yeah. I was a hustler. I knew that I wanted to make money. I knew that I wanted to absorb as much knowledge about government and politics and business. So I was willing. I was a process server where you take someone's getting served for a civil. I was a process server for a while. I worked at Best Buy as a loss prevention manager for a while. I worked at an old tire recycling plant, which was probably the dirtiest job I'd ever had before. I did that working was not a problem for me. Not because I necessarily needed to, but it's because I just wanted to. I
Yeah.
just knew, as my dad would always say, it built character, and character, Dee, to this very day is very important for me.
Right.
And I knew that it would lead to a better life, better options. As I often tell my daughters now that having money does not make you happy.
Right.
It does not. It gives you more options.
Right.
It's the difference between staying at a 5-star hotel or a 2-star hotel, or driving, public transportation, or driving a car. So I've always been driven by how can I present myself, deliver more options for what it is I want to do.
Right. So you go through all of these different career paths, and eventually you land on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
So talk to me about that journey.
It was fantastic. I had the great opportunity, first of all, to work as a senior advisor in the Clinton administration, both at the White House and at the Department of Labor, for Alexis Herman, who, as you know, is the first African-American woman to ever be the Secretary of Labor,
Right.
who I'd known during my tenure working for Ron Brown.
And Ron Brown was significant in that he was the first African-American
Absolutely.
to serve as the
DNC chair.
Right.
That's exactly
but also
right.
Secretary of
Commerce. That's
of
exactly
Commerce,
right.
and he tragically died in a plane crash
in
right.
Croatia. That's
right,
exactly
in Croatia,
right.
right.
So I was just very fortunate to be able to have lines of sight and relationships with both of them.
Yeah.
And Alexis gave me, the Secretary Herman gave me an opportunity to really grow my career and my network and understand sort of the input and the output of government. I later went on to work on Capitol Hill and became a chief of staff to former Congressman Harold Ford Jr. of Tennessee, who, interestingly enough, Harold and I were interns together working for Ron Brown. So just as ambitious as he was, so was I.
Right.
And we often laugh now, and we've been friends for some 35 years. He and I still talk twice, 3 times a week. And we think about how our lives have changed.
Right.
And how they've become so much better as a result of our friendship.
Right.
But I spent time working as Harold's chief of staff, learned a great deal about the legislative process, more importantly about the role that how business can really play in the legislative process, and how you can really implement great policy.
Right. But you participated in a brutal confirmation hearing during your time. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it was shortly after it was the second term of the Clinton administration, and President Clinton had appointed Alexis to be Labor Secretary.
Yeah.
And it was pretty brutal. There was a number of folks on both sides of the aisle, mostly on the other side of the aisle, that the opposing party was coming after Alexis for a wide range of reasons. But we prevailed, largely because Alexis's character was superior. Her focus was to this very day driven on what mattered the most. We built an amazing coalition led primarily by members of Delta Sigma Theta, which Alexis is a lifetime member of, and every day we made it real clear that we were going to pack that hearing room with as much red as we could get. And so when those senators walked in from the committee to begin drilling her around her nomination process, that they would see a sea of red behind her, and they knew that these women were here to support Alexis, and they were taking notes and taking names of people who did not do right by Alexis, and as a result, it was tough.
Yeah.
It was very tough. She prevailed, and I think the work that she did as Labor Secretary has been unparalleled to date.
Right. So you spent, I guess, the majority of your professional career in D.C. on the Hill, correct? Mm-hmm. So do you recall where you were during 9/11? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. So by that time, I'd left the Hill. I'd started my lobbying practice, and I had recently gotten married, and we had a kid, a daughter, my oldest daughter, Madeline. And I remember when the towers were hit, I was actually having lunch with a good friend of mine named Danny Black, who was in town from New York.
Okay.
He was an investment banker, and he happened to come in town, and he says, hey, let's get together, have a little breakfast, which later turned into lunch, which later turned into dinner. It was tragic. It was the city in Washington was in chaos. We were seeing the images on television.
Right.
A number of friends. By this time, I had built a pretty good reputation in New York with a number of investment bankers and guys on Wall Street that I had known for a long time. It was a very tragic and sad and dark day. But my number one priority was where was my wife and where was our kids at the time.
Yeah.
And she at the time was working at Fannie Mae, which was away from Capitol Hill. My office was downtown, which was also away from Capitol Hill. So it was a little bit of a relief, but you didn't know.
Right.
You didn't know where the planes were going. You didn't know the chaos, how it would mushroom and sort of really consume so much of our psyche on that tragic day.
Right. So you went on to found your own lobbying firm, grew it to be the largest African American lobbying firm.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your lobbying firm and just tell me about an issue that you lobbied for that you've been very passionate about.
Wow, that's a great question. I did. We grew the firm to be pretty significant. We had a huge staff and did annual revenues that were impressive. I think they will be still impressive to this day. We primarily represented big corporations, Walmart, Toyota, FedEx, Verizon. But we also did a lot of work for Texas Southern University, who I'm very close to, which is a HBCU in Texas, as you well know. Right. We've done work for Mississippi Valley State in Mississippi, down in the Delta, the city of Houston. I mean, we've had over the span of my career, I've probably had some 90 clients or so. Yeah. At some point, you just kind of stop counting them and just fortunate enough that they would trust you to do work for them. Right. We've been participating at the forefront of a number of different key initiatives. One in particular was the debundling or the breakup of the bail system. I joke with my daughters often. I says, I remember when Verizon didn't exist. And he's like, Dad, what are you talking about? Verizon's always been around. I says, no. I said, my first client in the telecom space was Bell Atlantic. They'd never heard of Bell Atlantic. Right. They'd never heard of 9X. They've never heard of, Bell South, right? Right. And it's because those were the bells that essentially created what we now know as Verizon. Right. And so I was fortunate enough to be on the team that essentially helped create what we now know from a policy perspective, Verizon. Same thing with Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. I was very fortunate enough to be a part of a small select group of policy makers and policy advisors to sort of help put together a 22 agencies organization that we now know as the Department of Homeland Security. So I'd like to think I've been at the forefront. Either I'm just a really old guy or fairly smart to be at the forefront of some real groundbreaking public policy initiatives in this country. Right, and speaking of groundbreaking achievements, you were part of the team that brought the Washington Nationals back to D.C. from Montreal, and one of the first minority owners of a major league baseball team. So talk to me about that. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. The year was 2006. The Montreal Expos were looking to be sold. Our partnership group, led by a very, very prominent family in Washington called the Lerners, they put together a pretty significant team of minority owners, of minority Black and Hispanic owners, to be a part of the partnership group, and I was chosen as a founding partner. And we were delighted to sort of lead this effort, both from a community perspective, but also from an economic perspective. We really sort of were fortunate enough to breathe an economic. If you come to Washington now, you'll see the sort of waterfront in Washington has really been revitalized, largely because the building of the stadium and the team has done so well. Right. So we have really contributed, I'd like to think, in many ways, to the sort of economic resurgence that has taken place in Washington over the last, 10 to 15 years. Right. So what do you consider your greatest achievement thus far? Oh, wow. What are you most proud of? So it would probably have to be the work that we've done in helping to build the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington. My good friend Harry Johnson, who at the time was the president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, sort of been hit for years, have been driving this effort to raise money and work with members of Congress to identify land on the National Mall to build this memorial.
Right.
And Harry was kind enough to reach out to me. We went to lunch together and laughed and talked, and he says, I got something I just need your help on. And at the time, I was too focused on business and growing my network and raising a family. But when Harry sort of rolled out his vision and why this was so important and so significant, I couldn't say no.
Right.
And he had been a friend. So we spent 10 to 12 years working with Congress and identifying corporations and raising money. Some $200+ million is what the memorial, it cost the memorial to be built. Our firm raised some almost $50 million to that effort. And we were delighted 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago, to dedicate it to the American people, to the world, not just to American, but to the world, this amazing, beautiful, beautiful, heart-wrenching, inspirational memorial that we now call the Martin Luther King Memorial. We often like to joke that, the National Mall has, Lincoln and Jefferson and Washington, obviously, and we like to say that Dr. King, it's a king among presidents.
Yeah.
Because he's the first person ever to be honored on the mall, a man of peace, a man of justice, a man of that's not a non-president.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant.
Right, right.
On the greatest real estate ever.
So, obviously making the journey from the inner city of Houston to Capitol Hill and, and really performing at the highest level as a business, you had to have some influential people along the way. So who are some of the people that helped influence you and provided you good guidance and counsel along the way? Yeah,
I think I mentioned a few earlier. I mean, in many ways, it have to definitely start with my parents, who were my mother, such a driving force. My father, such a driving force in teaching me a great deal about being a person of character and working hard and staying focused. Ron Brown, Alexis Herman, Vernon Jordan. I had the great opportunity to spend a great deal of time with him. May he rest in peace. There's just been, Dee, I've been enormously blessed to have so many great people, professors, and even to this very day, a number of people have sort of come into my life to inspire me. I believe that no one comes in by accident. There's a purpose that they come into your life for you to learn from them, or to learn what to do or what not to do in many ways. Right. And so I've been, whether it's in business, or just in my personal life, is wanting to be a better father, wanting to be a better son, wanting to be, just a better friend. You see so many great opportunities, and it's important for us to just sort of seize on them. Right.
So we may have some young viewers watching, maybe even older viewers that are trying to find their way to success. What advice would you give to anyone watching that's trying to figure out how to build success in their own lives?
Well, I can tell you that for me, there's just some real basic tenets, some principles. First of all, my faith is everything. My family, my friends, staying focused, being able to seize every opportunity that come your way. I don't think things happen. I don't believe in coincidences. I don't think I'm sitting here with you as a coincidence.
Right.
I think everything is divinely ordered, and we have to, as the good words say, be still and know.
Yeah.
And be willing to listen and focus. It may not always bear fruit immediely, but at some point it will, because it's just sort of the way life is.
Right.
But I would also tell a younger person to sort of, you know, be a student of whatever your craft is.
Right.
If you want to be if you're interested in being a cameraman or a fashion designer, be the best at that.
Right.
Be a student of it. Don't.
Right.
We have a tendency to want to do things a little quicker, be in this social media microwave world that we live in, looking
Right.
for shortcuts.
Right.
You want to focus on longevity. You want to create a legacy, and part of creating a legacy is that you have to really focus on how to be the best at it. And it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
It's going to require some hard work.
Right.
And don't be afraid of hard work. Don't be afraid of it.
I want to thank you again for being on the show,
Absolutely.
man. It was great. You've done amazing things. I appreciate you taking time out your hectic schedule to be here with me on the show.
Sure.
And to my viewers, I want to thank you for watching this episode of Self Made. I'm